Hey everyone, welcome to Altitude. I'm your host, Woody Woodworth. Really super cool show today. We are joined by Matthias Wulfert, who is a network solution manager, but really that title doesn't do him justice. He is responsible for all of the cloud networking and wide area networking, or WAN, for one of the largest SIs or system integrators in Western Europe. And we have a lot to talk about today in terms of connectivity, network security, what's hot, what's not in the last mile, all of those great topics. So Matthias, welcome to the show.
Thank you for your invitation, Woody.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining. So first, how long have you been doing this networking thing? Was that, something that you got into at a younger age, like right out of college, or did you do a couple of other jobs first and then find out that networking was your thing? How did you come about this position?
Actually, I was in the IT starting since I was 10, I think. My father was also a little bit in the IT. He did something for some newspapers and so on. He wrote some code. And yeah, I got the passion from him, I think. But I did not come to the networking part. It was mostly coding. I did some things for companies, small companies, websites, and so on when I was in school. And later on, I studied computer science with a focus on media. It's called Media and Informatik in Germany. I don't know how I can describe it. It was mostly the first things of AI. So we talked about large language models and so on, but we also did video analysis for drones. So we programmed the drone to fly through the forest by itself without any help from the humans. And later on, after college, a friend of mine started at the company where I'm working at the moment. And he told me a little bit about the company, and he was also a networking guy. And I thought, that sounds cool. I want to look into it. And it was 8 years ago. And yeah, I'm still here as a networking guy.
Oh, that's really cool. So being into IT at the age of 10 is pretty cool. I'm not sure whether that was just holding a flashlight or whether you were actually in there troubleshooting desktops.
I think it was something in between. I wrote my first lines of code, starting with Hello World, like everybody does. But I really started with coding with C.
Wow, that is impressive. So here you are, steeped in software engineering and code, and then you turn to the dark side at the interest or suggestion of a friend who says, come on over to networking. It's cool. What was it about networking that interested you over being a coder? I mean, you had experience with LLMs and drone technology and, embedded systems, but yet networking is your thing. I'm just curious because us network engineers and architects come from so many different backgrounds. I love to learn each person's journey into the field. Some of us have been musicians, some of us have been artists, some of us have been programmers. Some of us really just got into networking first thing as their first career and never left. So what was the magic moment for you when you're like, okay, this networking thing is far cooler than code?
I think it was the diversity. Actually, when I started with networking, one of my first tasks was to automate network deployment with the former Catalyst Center. I don't know the name yet, where we started to integrate the networking and the automation. So I thought it was very interesting to see how I can automate large infrastructure and I actually see what I'm doing instead of sitting in a room and just coding and bug fixing and so on. And that was really the thing which I think why I'm still in network. You've got so many different architectures for customers and you always get something new there. You've got automotive customers where you've got the large fabrics where you do the networking. You also got the finance sector where it's completely different, which requirements are needed. So yeah, it's the diversity, I think. And I see what I'm doing.
Yes, I have that same level of engagement and interest in networking. What I mean to say is that I also am really fascinated and interested in big puzzles and big systems. So I strive to be, maybe I'm not, but I strive to be a systems thinker. right? Interoperability, large scale connectivity, panning the camera back and looking at the big picture, as well as being able to pinch and zoom in and seeing the small things. I felt that networking gave me that kind of freedom. Whereas when I was younger learning to code, and I was never a great coder, it did feel a little bit constraining to me. And I think maybe that's something that unites all networking professionals, is that we're just obsessed with constantly looking at all the different possibilities of the system and, the art of the possible. And I know that programmers have their own capability in that medium, but it really is exciting to bring up and maintain a huge network and just think about all of the outcomes that big network provides. It's a really cool feeling. So sorry to nerd out on you, but I have that same passion about networking.
Yeah, that's also cool to be the guy who gets called when the wireless LAN of his friends is not doing well.
Right. Yeah. That's another thing we do. I have troubleshot many different home routers, and usually it's the old IT game, have you tried turning it off and back on again?
And it mostly works.
Yeah, it does. It mostly works. I mean, usually it's something like there's, a KM table that's tipped, or a bad ARP entry, or, the routing stack has gotten wedged, or, there's always a deeper reason. But when you reboot the router, it's like, screw it. It fixes everything. So yeah, classic IT trick. Works great for home Wi-Fi anyway. I just had to troubleshoot my home Wi-Fi for my kids day before yesterday, so it never ends. It never ends. All right. Well, focusing on cloud specifically, you have a lot of experience in cloud networking and then connecting wide area networks to cloud, what we typically refer to these days as hybridity or hybrid networking. Is that where you started, right in with cloud? Or did you start with more your traditional Cisco stuff and then later on get interested in cloud?
The first things I started was with traditional campus networking.
Mhm.
Cloud wasn't a thing in Germany when I started. It was 2016. But I think it was 2017 or 18 when we got the first big project. We've got a finance customer who wanted to do a single cloud deployment and cloud first and cloud only deployment. My
Mhm.
former manager asked me, "You're always on the new things. Do you want to make cloud?" And I said yes. And that's where my cloud journey started, actually. I started with cloud, not with wide area network. Maybe some guy thinks wide area network would be more of a traditional networking discipline. But I got into wide area networking because of cloud. Because every customer asked me, and how can I connect now the cloud to my on-premise environment?
Mhm. So it was really more, necessity is the mother of invention, right? It was just a cool project. It sounded fun. You raised your hand and said, I'll do it, and then jumped into cloud that way, right?
Yeah, it was that way. But I was always on new stuff. Give me the new stuff. I don't want to make the all traditional stuff, which everybody does.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a good way to stay vibrant in our career path, right? You really do have to have a hunger for the new stuff to stay on the cutting edge, the bleeding edge, and that's where all the excitement is. So it's, not every networking person wants to learn the new stuff, but for those of us that are kind of thrill seekers as such, it's a great way to keep your life interesting and a little stressful at the same time.
Yeah. But actually, that's the
Yeah.
coolest thing on my current role because I only do the new stuff. I'm responsible for portfolio. So my manager or my director asked me, what is the new stuff? How does it work? Can we sell it? Do we need it? Does the customer need it? And I think that's also why I got this role, because I'm striving for the new stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Good deal. So when you first were doing these initial cloud projects, your first cloud project, how did this customer choose to connect their network? Was it a VPN and they use that? Did they go straight in for private connectivity, say like a direct connect? Was it a mix of things? How did that project shake out?
Actually, it was quite interesting because they started with a SD-WAN deployment and a full SD-WAN
Mhm.
deployment. I do not see it often that the customers start with the SD-WAN deployment. Normally, they start with a VPN if they are on a
Mhm.
short timeline. We've got a lot of customers who start with a direct connect. or ExpressRoute in Azure and so on.
Mhm.
It depends mostly on timelines, but I think the best solution is the SD-WAN part, because you can use both. The customer, I still know them and I'm still talking to them. They still got the same design for the connectivity in the cloud and in the wide area network.
I see. And it's meeting their performance requirements. I mean, SD-WAN is great. It's beautiful for some, especially if you're in, say, manufacturing or retail, and you have a lot of offices or campuses that are spread out over a wide area, and you've got a lot of last mile, right? And you don't have, say, one big data center or two big data centers that are kind of the center of your world. Here in the States, SD-WAN is popular with those kinds of customers, but there are other verticals that require a tremendous amount of bandwidth, financial services, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, these kinds of companies. They can use SD-WAN, but we find, at least I found in my experience, that there's a speed limit to encryption in the cloud, right? That is based on the limitations of a single core in a virtual machine and how much IPsec throughput it can deliver, because you can't take that single encrypted affinity, the symmetrical encrypted tunnel, and multi-threaded or multiplex it across multiple cores. That one core is responsible for the encryption piece on a tunnel. So there's this speed limit of about 1.5, maybe on a really good day if you're using optimized cipher, 2 gig per IPsec tunnel, not on the physical side, but again, on the virtual side. So that can cause some customers to pause and say, well, I really need 10 or 15 or 20 gig in to the cloud. So SD-WAN is great for a part of my network, but it just simply can't handle the bandwidth I need. Do you run into situations like that?
Yeah, I actually run in such situations, but it's not that common. I think it depends a little bit on the use cases of the customer. So in Germany, we get a lot of sites for customers. So we are all still in the offices, or a lot of our customers are still in the offices. You've got very small sites, and at the moment, they are all connected via MPLS to the main headquarters. And that's not really cost efficient. So for these things, you can design a direct connection over SD-WAN with clouds or different locations, and you can still utilize the MPLS line, but in a smaller bandwidth with less cost for applications where you need service level agreements. But the thing which you mentioned with the huge bandwidth, I normally only have from the data center itself. That's all where I see the use case, and there we can make an exception, I would say. We build a lease line with 10 gig or more and so on, and directly connect it to your cloud.
How big of a deal is encryption for these customers, or most SD-WAN customers? Are they concerned about privacy and they're wanting to make sure that all of their data is, essentially private, encrypted between all of their various offices in the cloud? Or do you see that a lot of companies feel that the application level encryption is enough? So basically SSL or TLS, and they're not so worried about having, an IPsec tunnel from here, there, everywhere.
It depends on the application and the data which is sent around, actually. We've got a lot of regulatory in Germany, or in the whole European Union, where they basically dictate for which data you have to use which level of security. But I would say mostly all customers use encryption, so with IPsec and so on, only for Teams, Office, and so on. These are things which are normal internet traffic.
Right. Yeah, that's your typical SaaS web-based security. Yep. Yeah, we see a lot of that same thing over here in North America, insofar as a lot of the brownfield enterprise companies that are either moving to cloud and shuttering data centers, or establishing a perpetual, hybrid posture where they will always have some workloads on-prem and some in cloud. The networking and security teams tend to say, we just want everything encrypted because we're not totally sure of all the protocols that are going through the network. We have a good idea about most of them, especially as we configure the firewalls, but there are a lot of legacy applications, heritage applications that are out there, and it's much safer just to encrypt everything than it is to try to sort out what applications need it and what applications don't, right? They're just like, forget it, just encrypt everything, be safe. And then if something's going out to a SaaS service out of their DMZ over the internet, fine, just let that be TLS, pretty much.
Yeah, I see completely the same in Germany.
Yeah.
Better safe to be sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So I have this idea that we are going to see, another big explosion of workloads, both hybrid and cloud-based, brownfield and greenfield, driven by AI. Not that AI has been hiding in the closet, right? People that are in the know are familiar with AI and machine learning and LLMs and know that those have been around in the cloud for at least 5 or 6 years. So it's not like AI suddenly, showed up out of nowhere. But of course, now with Gen AI and ChatGPT and Gemini and all these other more popular consumer-driven AI services, everyone's jumping on the bandwagon. So just as AI is very power hungry, I think it's also going to be very bandwidth hungry because these LLMs need petabytes or, what's above peta? Is it like zettabyte? Anyway, it's a buttload of data that they're going to need, right? Moved around. And so the network is going to go through, in a positive way, a renaissance, in a negative way, a very big strain to accommodate all this data. And I'm very curious about what that's going to do to overall network design. Are you seeing that kind of pattern starting to sprout up in Western Europe, where customers are coming to you and saying, we're interested in Gen AI or interested in, some LLM service, and we want our network to do 10, 20, 40, 60 gig, or not yet?
I'm hearing it more often. A lot of customers start in the cloud with Azure, Google, or AWS because they got nice PaaS services which can be used for it. We also get some customers who do it on-premise because if you're using it a lot, it's cheaper than in the cloud. And you get the whole data at your data center, which is due to regulatory and so on.
Right.
Yeah, but it's a completely different networking thing. I think on-premise, you're using different vendors from the normal ones, I would say. It's not my expertise. I only know some vendors like NVIDIA, which are also doing networking for AI. But I don't think it will be such a huge topic for networking in the cloud because the cloud scales. I do not have to build new routers, new switches into the cloud. I can just use what GCP gives me, what Azure gives me. I only have to design everything around it, that it works nicely. And I have to look out where I plan connections. So in my opinion, I shouldn't send data from the cloud to on-premise for AI use cases. Because as you mentioned, it's such a huge bandwidth. So use it in your data center or use it in the cloud.
So you're saying that AI will probably drive networking patterns that do not favor hybrid because the bandwidth requirements and the latency and data requirements are so large that either it's going to be all contained in cloud. So like, your front end and middleware is in cloud and then your LLM is there, or that it will be on-prem because of the cost and effectiveness of that. Thus, hybrid patterns won't be stressed out as much.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Meaning, yeah.
I hope it drives not hybrid patterns, but it's only for this application. For different applications, different patterns. But in my opinion, for AI, it doesn't make any sense because of the huge workload and the huge bandwidth you need. So if you get everything in the cloud, use everything in the cloud. Why should I pay so much money just because I want a part of it in my data center?
That's definitely possible. I think there are some businesses that will try. Whether they're successful or not, I think time will tell, because they might find that it is too expensive for them to build a local AI stack. I mean, I haven't priced any of this stuff out, right? But I'm sure they're doing the cost analysis of what is it going to be to transport or hydrate my LLM from on-prem to cloud versus where the AI is, versus building my own AI stack, either in the middle cloud, like say an Equinix or Cologic's data center, or actually building it on-prem. I say this because the chips are horrifically expensive, right? Like there's really, other than the cloud providers themselves that are OEMing some of these AI chips, AWS is for sure, and I'm sure Microsoft, if they're not already doing it, they've got plans to. So NVIDIA is really the only game in town, right? In terms of the top end. I'm sure there are some other smaller players, but NVIDIA seems to be the big 800-pound gorilla of AI chips. So these chips are hard to come by, and they're not cheap. So if I'm going to build an AI stack in my data center, I'm going to have a pretty strong cash flow. Would you agree?
I don't really know because I'm not the expert. I do not know how they compare to different chips or to blade centers, which are currently in use. I only know the networking devices of NVIDIA, and they are not that expensive. I think the AI chips will be much more expensive, but yeah, I don't really know.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I don't really know either. To be honest, I've never been in a position where I had to price this stuff out. It's like one of these things where if you have to ask, can't afford it. So yeah,
It's the same for me, and I have a colleague which is responsible for our whole automation story as well as the AI story. So he could tell you, but I cannot.
yeah. I think companies will try. I think it's going to be exciting and interesting and not scary, but challenging to see how companies solve hybridity for AI, and whether or not that becomes a pattern that stays, or whether that need for encryption, that speed limit to encryption based on the way that cloud processors handle IPsec, the need for big bandwidth and low latency is something that the networking industry at large can solve, or whether it's all going to be a house of cards and people are going to say, yeah, this hybrid thing for AI just isn't the way to go. And then to your point, we'll see a couple different ecosystems emerge. We'll see cloud-based AI, which is more of a greenfield thing. And then we'll see, I think we'll see an edge AI play where people are using more like physical stuff, metal stuff, right, to get their LLM hydrated in a middle cloud, or those that can afford it will actually build little AI pods in their data centers. And maybe if these cloud service providers are smart, and they're probably already thinking about this, they could create like an AI rack, that you like lease. And then this rack can go in like a colo provider, a carrier neutral facility, or it can go in, a POP, or it could go in a data center, and it's still the cloud technology, but it's like a boutique rack with that they just roll in and power on, and then it's managed by the cloud.
Yeah, so it's basically the Azure stack of AI.
Yes, you got it. AWS has theirs, and it's what is it called? Is it called? Oh, I suck at this. AWS, of course, and both GCP as well. They both have their stacks that are like their cloud hardware stacks that go. And I'm sorry if I've forgotten the branding.
I also have forgotten them because no customer really did use them because they were expensive. It's just a rack,
Yeah.
and you've got the same design as from Azure, from the cloud data center. And it's also sending data to Microsoft. So why should I buy it?
Yeah, I think that there's a special kind of customer that benefits from that. But I agree, based on the current SaaS offerings and services that clouds provide, it's not super compelling unless there are really difficult latency problems for that particular app or workload that the customer is trying to solve, which isn't always there. That's kind of a corner case, right? Where like I want to use, like, let's just say like a batch service or something, like a compute service where I have rapid scale up and scale down, of course, to do genomics or DNA modeling or something. But the application I'm using has a 2 millisecond, 1 millisecond latency threshold. At that point, and if my campus is 15, 20 milliseconds away from the closest cloud region, then I would be looking at something like that stack, to bring that service in to a latency horizon that's acceptable. But, that's a corner case. And I agree that we're not seeing a huge uptick right now, at least not in my opinion, of this cloud rack moving out to the customer edge. But maybe AI is the thing that will drive that. Maybe that's where things change, because to our earlier point, giving that hybrid networking to accommodate the speed and the encryption, the security and the bandwidth, that might be a tall order. I don't know. It's just interesting to think about.
Yeah, I'm looking forward for the future. I don't know what will happen.
Yeah.
Maybe we get some fancy SaaS services for AI and everybody just integrates the SaaS services to their applications.
Yeah, could be. That would be an interesting thing. There's a lot of data privacy involved. So the SaaS service would have to be very carefully constructed to make sure that the data ingestion was sensitive to, GDPR, PII, PCI, these kinds of things, but it could be done. So talk to me a little bit about some of your favorite patterns for hybridity and wide area networking. You mentioned SD-WAN was one, right? And we know that in Europe, that has a lot of traction, more so than in North America for a variety of reasons. Are there any other big networking patterns that you like to work on, or that are a lot of fun or interesting for you?
I think the networking pattern should change according to the customer. So when I'm in pre-sales meetings with customers who start with the cloud, they ask me, do you got the blueprint for everything which we can use for our infrastructure as well? And I start to explain to them, you're now in the cloud. Do not need a blueprint for everything which everybody is using. You can design it according to your requirements. Ask your developers, what do they need? And we build a network after their requirements. We've got some things which you see it as every customer, like the normal hub and spoke concept of the cloud, but in various designs. So we've got some customers with, I think it was 100 regional hubs, which are connected to continental hubs. So it was a huge cloud environment. It was mainly because of security reasons and the different zones, but it was also an example of how you can shape the cloud according to your requirements. So I cannot say I've got a favorite pattern, because my favorite pattern is the pattern which suits the needs of my customer.
Right. Which takes us right back kind of to the beginning of our conversation of what's really fun about networking and being into network design, especially when cloud is involved, is that you're absolutely right. To have a pattern is an anti-pattern, right? Because every workload ends up being different in terms of its demands in the cloud and the way that it's put together. There are best practices, and there are things that you do to inform your design so that they are robust and scalable and secure. But in terms of coming in with like, these are the 3 blueprints we see for cloud success, I completely agree. There are none, because every customer's app is a little different. Their requirements are a little different. Their security needs are a little different. And so thus the networking design ends up flexing or changing in the cloud to accommodate that. And I do see customers struggling with that idea. They're used to, developing their core, their DMZ, their routing stack, you get their perimeter set up, and they're like, okay, we're ready for the applications. And it's like, no. You're doing it backwards. If you do that, what's going to happen is that these applications are going to run into network constraints, because you're saying this security stack has to be here. This traffic has to leave here and come into the security stack and leave this way. And you're like, yes, but this application is going to talk to a SaaS service that is going to be very difficult to pull through this firewall. You could, but that means you're going to have to, suck out half of the public IP addresses that are in that cloud region and push them through your firewall. Are you sure you want to do that? And then they're like, no, we don't want to do that. And I'm like, well, then maybe there's a different way, so it's this whole idea, I think, about decentralized networking in cloud, where things are spread out more. Like, instead of it being like one big point solution, you can go for a security stack that actually follows the application or is able to stretch and be elastic as the network grows, I think is very exciting. What are your thoughts about all that? Am I just crazy guy in a corner? Or do you just let Woody go? I'll talk when he shuts up.
No, my thoughts are actually the same. Do not understand me wrong. I'm a huge fan of standardization and automation. You need standardization for automation. What I see at my customer, it's a huge consulting effort, and it's actually fun for me to sit down with the customer. You start with one use case. So it's the first use case. It's the lighthouse. We are starting with cloud. Then we've got 20th, the third use case. And then you see patterns at the customer's use cases. And then you can start to standardize the patterns. And then you can get back to networking patterns, but it's only for this customer. And then you can start to automate. That's why I said, actually, I'm not a fan of network patterns because I'm thinking about three-tier architecture, networking, and so on. You've got to do this, then your network works for every customer. That's why I said network patterns is for me individual for every customer. And we try to find it out for every customer. What is his network pattern?
Right. Let's talk a little bit more about your experience as, an elite network solution manager, solution architect. What do you think, if you were to give 3 tips or hints or pieces of wisdom to someone that aspires to be in your position, what would you tell them? What do you think really makes a good solution architect, solution manager, especially when it comes to cloud? What qualities would you look for, say, to hire someone on your team?
Be curious would be the first one. Always look for the new stuff, look into it. You also have to develop a passion for new stuff. That's the way you get in this role. And as I said, it's one of the main areas of my role. The second one would be social. I am also in contact with a lot of vendors. That's also where I get news, what is new at vendor X and so on. And I'm also talking a lot to my customers, not only about the current project, but what are the needs in general. And I think you need a little bit of a social component that you get these things out of your customers instead of just the project's information. And the third one, maybe be diligent. Diligent, hardworking.
I would add perseverance. Anyone that is working on the cutting edge and constantly, first of all, I agree with everything you said. I think it's amazing advice. I think those that are successful in our field are okay making mistakes. I'm not talking about bringing down an entire network, although that happens, and one can personally and professionally survive this thing. I brought down MSNBC for a while in a previous job. We won't go to that. It was, I survived that one. That was a fun day. But it wasn't at Aviatrix, just so you know. That had nothing to do with Aviatrix. But it is okay to make mistakes, and because that's the only way we're going to learn. And some of the stress of networking, I think, comes from that fear of screwing it up for everyone and being like, oh my gosh, I'm going to switch over to this new pattern, this new architecture. What if it doesn't work? And the answer is nobody knows. And if it doesn't work, you dig in and you stick with it, and you go through the exercise and you make it work, because to your earlier point, every application, every customer has a slightly different pattern. I can't just go to chapter 15 of an O'Reilly book and say, oh yeah, see in chapter 3, I skipped that step. Like, none of that exists. So you have to be a little fearless, and you have to be okay with learning as you go, right? So, all right, so what? It didn't work perfectly. Like, you're dropping, 20% of your packets. Find the problem, troubleshoot, stay calm, and, get through it.
Actually, you got quite a point, and I want to change my third answer to don't be afraid.
Yeah.
A former colleague who trained me said to me, don't be afraid. Nothing is rocket science except for rocket science. So he meant, you can do everything. It's not that complicated. And don't be
Yes.
afraid, just do
Yes.
it. And it's not just for new architecture and so on. If you're starting out as a new IT engineer or something like this, don't be afraid to talk to your customers. Don't be afraid to present in a meeting or on a stage and something like this.
Yes. Perfect. Well, listen, we're coming up on time, and man, how the time flies. Matthias, this has been such a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed all of your insights and wisdom and just sharing what's cool, what's hot, what's new in your corner of the world, or your big pond of the world, I should say, your big corner, because you've got, quite a big industry there. But just thank you so much for your time coming on the show and keeping it real, man. Thank you.
I also thank you again for your invitation. It was a fun experience.
Yeah, there you go. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, surely. I'm open for it every time.
Cool. All right. You take care. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.